Welcome back to the podcast. This week's podcast is a little sensitive. I'm going to talk about body parts and sexuality. So if you're sensitive to these things, this might be one to skip. I think I was maybe 14 years old the first time I touched a penis. It was the dead of night on a school bus headed back from a weekend field trip I can no longer remember. The boy was officially my boyfriend, although at the time that meant little more than awkward phone conversations after school every night. And, of course, the explorations of our bodies under a backpack on the bus. I knew almost nothing about sex or sexuality, but the feeling of his unquestionable desire made manifest in my hand lit a fire in my body, and I liked it. With that knowledge and the privilege of being labeled gender normative, I was able to go out into the world and begin exploring what I did and didn't want in terms of what was attached to the penis. The man and the theoretic relationship. Thus also began my exploration of myself and my relationship to sex and intimate relationships in general, and my own sexuality. If I'm honest, I'm still doing that. In fact, I hope we all are. I hope we're always evolving and ever more deeply discovering ourselves, sexually and in every other way. It breaks my heart that some people don't get that chance because of perceived limitations about themselves in the world or because of the limitations of a cultural understanding of sexual identity and gender. As a child, I saw femininity as a role more than an identity, a creature that put her own wants and needs aside in service of the family, or at least the counterpart, the partner. In that naive perspective that grew almost exclusively from the media and watching my mother, femininity didn't exist without the outside relationship, the man or the family, the entity to whom she would be submissive, subversive, passive, motherly, for whom she would be martyred. There's truth in this idea, of course. Light does not exist without darkness. Joy loses all definition without sorrow. Absolutely. In my view, femininity needs masculinity. But not to fight against, not even to define it, although I think that can be useful. The basic truth is that they need each other to exist. Period. Hard stop. It seems, though, that we don't stop. We haven't stopped. In the past, we set a definition for each gender and its role that we could accept commonly, understand universally. We took what we knew about nature and the world around us and sought to apply it to everyone. A human response, perhaps. Collectively, we seek to organize. We naturally congregate around ideas or belief systems or shared experiences. Our brains feel a need to sort out information in an effort to gain deeper levels of understanding. We like to label and define because it makes us feel safe. But we can only ever categorize and characterize based on what our brains already understand, the information we already have. And for a long time there, we worked so hard to sort our gender-based realities that we ended up pitting one against the other. For a long time after that, we unwittingly leveraged that energetic battle to station one gender or identity role over the other, which, of course, ultimately led to an unsustainable imbalance that we were obligated to begin drawing into equilibrium, whether we were aware of that or not. But it appears that as we do so, a couple, at least, deeper problems have been exposed, namely the postulated reality that heterosexual males are struggling with how to embody masculinity 2.0, the new non-toxic version, a reality which has stemmed in part from our evolving understanding of what it means to be sexual and gendered. Straight women and their associated femininity are markedly absent from these discussions, an observation that refreshingly has nothing to do with women being overlooked or minimized, in my view at least. It seems to me more that my gender-identified group has been left out of this conversation because it's a moot point. We've been living in a wildly fluid reality around what it means to be feminine for decades, perhaps centuries, in part because we were the subverted gender, and therefore we had to, quote, prove the value of our femininity. Perhaps more impactfully, though, we had to adopt, embrace, and even exhibit the masculine qualities inherent in us in order to scratch and crawl our way up to a level playing field. We came to the understanding long ago that we aren't 100% feminine. None of us. We can't be. We would never survive childbirth if we were operating from the perceived definition of femininity from the not-so-distant past. Collectively, then, we grew. Side by side, the genders came to understand that intending to operate solely in a space of identity based on sexual organs and associated hormones is, in fact, toxic. And that we actually work really well when we support each other in uncovering the contradicting qualities we all hold mixed within us. While men are still struggling, it seems, to embrace emotional self-awareness and tenderness and delicacy and self-sacrifice in favor of serving the emotional needs of the family unit, a great many are trying. Even more are finally dismantling the walls of fear around femininity and women in general, accepting that they may actually have some estrogen coursing through their veins and that it's nothing to worry about. That it isn't, in fact, a threat to their masculinity or self-identity, but rather a necessary part of it. That owning of their emotional reality won't make them homosexual, that cleaning the house doesn't make them a servant in their own homes, although, interestingly, they had no problem with their wives being a servant. That caring about the way they dress and take care of themselves doesn't mean they are attracted to other men. For the more testosterone-driven of our species, however, this new construct, or lack thereof, perhaps, has left them drifting aimlessly on a sea of undefined possibilities. If women make at least as much or more money, if women can manage motherhood and a full-time job, if women can protect their offspring at least as well or better than the stereotypical man, the inflated masculine energy effectively loses its definition. And they aren't alone in this experience. Non-binary gender identifiers are stepping out into the spotlight all over the world, and given that they've got years of experience, not only fighting for their rights, as women have done and are doing, they've also been fighting to exist, to define themselves. They've been grappling with the influence of cultural beliefs around who and how they should be in the world. Perhaps then, we can learn from their struggle and seek to expand our collective idea on what defines a particular human. Sexuality was long defined by what we understood to be natural. There are males and females of every living thing, and we assumed that to mean that there are only male and female humans too. But we know more now. We understand more. There are lots of animals that participate in what we would define as homosexual interactions. There are lots of animals that are asexual, and there are lots of animals that actually change their reproductive role to fit the needs of the group, like they change their bodies. The reality is gender identity has always been fluid. We just pared it down to the sexual organs because it fit with what we thought we knew at the time. It was natural. But we know better now, and traditional gender assignments aren't useful anymore. Skirted men fought some of the bloodiest and most violent battles throughout ancient history, and women sat on thrones. When indigenous peoples or proud Irish warriors painted their faces, it was in honor of masculine energy, the masculine energy of protection, an effort to add to that energy. When they danced and sang around a fire at night, it was a feminine, energetic celebration of family and community and nurturing. The pleasures of community and food and love. Yes, masculinity needs femininity to exist. I need masculinity in order to define my femininity, not in an effort to understand femininity in general, but rather to come into contact with my own version of it, what it looks like and means for me. But it doesn't have to be traditional male masculinity. One of my favorite people in the world is a very masculine human in a stunningly beautiful female body. That woman could easily carry me in her arms if she had to. She wears her hair shaved to the skin on all sides with a knot of silky soft, chin-length, chocolate-colored tresses bound into a bun on top of her head. As a child, it took at least 2 adults to hold her down while one of them zipped her into a dress. But on her wedding day, she nearly floated down the aisle in a stunning mermaid-cut gown with lace overlay, her hair curled over one ear and trailing down to her shoulder. She can build a garage entirely by herself and come inside at night to snuggle her children and read them bedtime stories. One of my favorite celebrities is a bearded man with a radiant personality that can rock a sequined ball gown and heels in a way that most women I know can't quite pull off. I've met some of the most feminine energy-carrying men I've ever known while they were dressed in the robes of the priesthood. And some of the manliest women I've ever known, the ones that could build a house with an axe and a hammer or fix a motorcycle on the side of the road, were also the ones that let a tear slide down their face at the sight of a first ray of sun reaching across the horizon, or the flight of an endangered bird species. Devastatingly, many of these humans have suffered numerous untold traumas for the clothes they choose to wear or the people with whom they choose to sleep at night. Societally speaking, we're clearly still struggling with the idea of gender definitions. Perhaps then, what we're dealing with in a cultural context is the reality that the fluidity of sexual identity is inherent in all of us. And because that truth challenges the status quo of what it has meant to be a man or woman, there's a lot of pushback, discomfort, confusion, fear, which we've allowed to manifest in societal arguments and even emotional abuse in an effort to categorize and label the very complex creatures we are. Binary gender definitions no longer fit. In truth, they never did. We just couldn't see it before, whether by choice or the limitations of science or our brains or whatever. Perhaps then, rather than create countless new labels for our identities, define them and then use them as guideposts for how to be in the world, and unintentionally how to judge each other, we would be better served to just strive to understand ourselves. Rather than invest our time, our energy, our thoughts in what it means to be feminine or masculine in the greater societal context, we can just invest ourselves in discovering what it means to be us. My personal process of deconstructing what femininity is and looks like as dictated to me by various matriarchs in popular culture was essential to discovering a broader and deeper understanding of the qualities of femininity that sprang from research in the spiritual realm. Drawing boundaries around my personal identity became clearer in some contexts when I understood myself in relationship to the men in my life, throughout my life. I'm the kind of human with a vagina. I knew that from the get-go. But it took that encounter on the bus for me to realize that I'm also the kind of human that likes the feel of a penis in my hand, and in other places. My strength as a woman, my ability to bear pain, my desire to be able to have my own money and be able to provide for myself, even my conviction in my own beliefs, were attributes that I discovered were a little too masculine for some men. My tenderness, my insecurities and sensitivity turned out to be a little too feminine for others. I learned early on in my adult years that an amazing dress could utterly transform the way I felt about myself, my confidence. The feel of the fabric shifting across my hips as I walked was a decidedly feminine sensation. However, that feeling of sexiness, of confidence, only existed because I knew how it felt to have a man's attention, and that I wanted that. Importantly, it only had to be a man's attention because I'm a straight woman. It had nothing to do with the definition of femininity itself, nor his degree of masculinity. Rather, I knew what I wanted, the affection of a man, and I had only to wholly embody my straight girl femininity to get it, assuming, of course, he was a heterosexual man also interested in me. Men in their varying degrees of masculinity helped me understand how I like to be touched, treated, and perceived. The reality that I am what some would call a, quote, strong woman felt initially like it was an unwelcome part of my femininity that had to be tolerated by the man that shared my romantic reality, or hidden by me. But with different men, that element of the reality of who I am became something to celebrate. Over the years, I've learned that I'm not a delicate woman. I'm not graceful. I'm an adrenaline junkie and a bookworm, a big fan of dresses and skirts, and a big fan of jeans and t-shirts. I'm a skier, a hiker, a bicyclist. I like to dress to the nines and go out in heels. I also like to lay at home in sweats. I love art and design and decorating, though I avoid actually building things at all costs. I like to rock climb and kayak and ride horses. I hate to clean, but I adore a clean house. I like long, flowy sweaters and the feel of a man's hand in the small of my back. I've been insanely attracted to long-haired men and bald ones, men with love handles and men with rigidly defined abs. Men who could build a house with an axe and a hammer, men that could hurt themselves if they tried to fix a car, but also could sit at a negotiating table and mow them down. I don't need the men in my life to fit a certain definition of masculinity, and I certainly don't fit with all the definitions of femininity. I'm not a feminine woman, I'm not a masculine one. I'm not a tomboy or a princess, I'm not a motorcycle bitch or a meek librarian. I'm all those things. I'm Jacqueline. Can't that be enough? Can't we just all accept that no one is any one thing and let people be whatever complicated mix of attributes they truly are? In my perspective, however naively optimistic it may seem, no one is really all one thing. Arguably, toxic masculinity is great evidence of the fact that when we try to fit ourselves into a definition born in the outside world, it becomes, well, toxic. Toxic masculinity is rooted in a conscious ignorance of the emotional self. The idea that what a human, a man in this case, feels must be subverted in preference to a definition of what it means to be a man, a burying of the true self that often results in distorted expressions of those feelings. In nature, in society, in commerce, in art and design, even in our diets and our financial portfolios, diversity is seen as valuable, essential to our ability to create healthy, sustainable ecosystems of all kinds across all contexts. Sameness is fragile, confining, even toxic. So why would our understanding of sexuality be any different? I don't want to pretend to know what's right for everyone or even anyone else. But I can say with certainty that not only do I need fluid masculinity to understand my personal femininity, I need sexual fluidity in general. Not because I'm bisexual or gay curious, but because I need men in my life. Not just classically defined gender normative men, but gay men, bisexual men, transgender men. Back in college, when I'd fallen hard for a man that didn't really want or love me, a beautiful male roommate of his seemed to be falling for me. And while I wasn't particularly attracted to Charlie, he was fascinating and intelligent and talented. I spent eternal nights lounging on the floor of his room, listening to him play the guitar. He often took me for long drives on the outskirts of town, and we would talk and laugh and explore our deepest wounds and desires. So when he got really drunk one night and confessed to me that he was gay, I was surprised. But after many more long nights together, I felt ever closer to Charlie. He created a safe place for me to heal my broken heart. Freed from the emotional minefield of confessing my insecurities to competitive girlfriends, I could tell Charlie anything, everything. He could hold me, work his fingers into my hair, and cradle my head against his shoulder, and I could surrender to his support, his love, without any concern that my vulnerability would be taken advantage of, or that I would trust this safe place for my heart and later have it ripped away by a man that didn't or couldn't love me the way I needed. In the end, I was the one who broke Charlie's heart. I met a man and got married while he was in South America for a semester abroad. I still feel bad about that. I didn't really understand or fully appreciate what Charlie and I had, what Charlie gave me, until decades later, before my marriage ended, but long after he'd stopped speaking to me. Now, though, as I work again to heal myself, my heart, ironically in South America, I yearn for the kind of relationship I had with Charlie. Yes, I want to make out and have sex and fall in love with a straight man again someday. But right now, I just need to be touched, to be held, to cuddle on the couch, or cry with no concern whatsoever for the impact my emotional nakedness may have on the relationship. I want to be able to expose my deepest internal wounds completely and talk openly and honestly about anything and laugh and flirt with no sexual implications. And if I'm honest, I'd love to do that for someone else. I would love to be a safe place for another human. And I feel like I could do it better this time. Yes, gender identity is changing. It seems the non-binary gender movement has ushered in a redefinition of what sexuality is, what masculinity and femininity really are. But femininity has been changing for decades, centuries even, and we still don't know exactly what it is. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we can decide to let that be okay. Do we really need to worry about what being a man looks like to the broader public? Maybe we could just focus on what being a good human looks like. Because being a man will mean 1,000 different things to 1,000 different people. Same as being a woman. It's time to stop pitting one against the other, or even compartmentalizing them into just the traditional two. Perhaps instead of worrying about what non-toxic masculinity looks like, or how we're, quote, supposed to show up in the world to attract the kind of partners we want, we can just appreciate the diversity, embrace that reality, and take the opportunity to support each other in growing to be exactly who we are and exactly how we want to be in the world. Even as heteronormative men succeeded in redefining and refining what exactly masculinity looks like, the non-binary community is lined up around the base of the mountain and beckoning us to do the growth work, climb up to reach another new vantage point, and adopt a whole other perspective on what it means to be human. I hope you have a wonderful week and feel empowered in being whoever you are. Join us next week for another exploration of the weird, random, and wonderful reality of being human. If you liked this podcast, remember to subscribe and please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/Jacqueline Lene. There you'll also get access to the personal stories of the random ways daily life inspires me to keep growing. And if you'd like to dig in and do some healing through self-love for yourself, check out the workshops and personal support sessions available on my website at authorjacquelinelene.com. That's JACLYNLANAE. Thanks for listening.